Welcome to Western Technical College Business and Industry Services. This video, along with other training opportunities from Western BIS, are designed to help employees stay informed on the latest trends in today's changing workplace. To learn how Western can support your business, visit us at westerntc.edu/BIS.
I'd just like to welcome everyone today to the webinar. This is actually the last in our webinar series. And today's topic we'll be talking about is leadership essentials. The webinar today will be recorded so that we can share that with those that have registered and make it available at a later date on our website as well. I'll just take a moment to introduce myself. My name is Angie Martin. I'm the Director of Business and Industry Services at Western Technical College. And in today's webinar titled Leadership Essentials, we are going to be touching on many of the really key aspects of leadership. So we have a series that we are looking at running in the new year, and I'll share more about that later, that kind of digs very deeply into each of these topics. In this webinar, we really wanted to make it a key overview for everyone, because I know for myself, no matter what level of leadership you're in or how long you've been doing it, quite often any tip or just a refresher of this information is good to have and can help us be more successful. So with that, I do want to share that today we will be joined by Ann Axelson. Ann is an adjunct instructor for Western Business and Industry Services and always does an exceptional job when she's hosting classes for us. We really value her career experience, and she's worked with leading organizations here in Wisconsin, and I can let her share that if she likes. So at this point, I will go ahead and turn it over to Ann, and thanks for being here today.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Angie, for letting me play. It's always wonderful to talk about the leadership essentials and talking about, as we do, helping prepare all of our emerging leaders as they jump into these topics. So today we're going to talk about, as Angie stated, just a few of the highlights from this. So when you think about leadership in total, it really is a huge topic. It talks about multiple disciplines, and it talks about the whole study of how complex it is to manage our interpersonal relationships, our team dynamics, and our organizational dynamics. So when we think about upskilling or making ourselves more capable in this regard, where do you start? And that's what Western Technical College is helping us with. So this series that Angie alluded to earlier is really a learning journey, and it allows you to become more effective as a leader, because it gives you not only some specifics to help you build your skills, but it helps when you practice them. And that is what the classes are all about. So we have these 6 topics that you see today. And again, this isn't everything that a leader would ever have to know, but it is a terrific foundation. So each of these 6 focus areas has a 3 to 4 hour class associated with it. And we're going to unpack just a little bit of each one. Think of this as a buffet, and you're getting a taste of the good stuff. So as we go through these: communication, emotional intelligence, managing projects, conflict resolution, embracing teamwork and culture, and cultivating the one we want, I will show you a slide that has the learning objectives for each one of these. And then highlighted in red, there will be one that we'll take just a little bit deeper dive into. So away we go, first with communication. And here we're talking about the idea that everything that we do really starts with communication. And so we talk about the importance of being clear and concise. And then we learn about and then practice active listening skills so that we exchange information in a most effective way that we can. We also go over tips to consider for email etiquette and business texting, which are really a very common set of practices for today's work environment. So the one that you see here that's highlighted is an area that we tackle in a big way in the communication course, and that is tactics to address challenging situations. So as we look at these challenging situations, it could be a whole bunch of different things, but these particular tactics apply directly to most of them. So as you can imagine, dealing with conflict immediately rather than letting it grow, because misunderstandings often do that, we want to tackle whatever it is that's causing potential friction in the organization and address it immediately. One of the other tactics that we talk about, and I mentioned this earlier, is practicing active listening. And a really important facet of active listening is being a participant in the conversation as someone is sharing with you what their concerns are. And so as you're listening, you clarify that you heard the message they were trying to deliver, or exactly the way that you heard it, and paraphrase it back to them so that they understand that you're there, you're concerned about whatever it is that's a conflict for them, and you're hoping to clarify all of that. In any kind of a challenging situation, we want to talk about people's emotional reactions, and those are often there because of the assumptions that we have. So as we're talking through and really getting to the crux of a challenging situation, we want to identify what our assumptions were as a leader coming into this situation. And if we have certain feelings about it, why we feel that way. Although we acknowledge the emotions, we can't let a conflict become personal. We need to be always hard on our problems, but not hard on our people, and ensure that we stick to the facts. And that's why, as I listed above, clarifying what our assumptions are is so important, because I could be having a clear understanding of what the person is sharing with me, but perhaps they've got some assumptions that are erroneous, or there's just a misunderstanding going on. The fifth one down on this list is really important. It says focus on actionable items. Another way that I think about this is we can only impact and affect the things that are within our span of control. We can't change the past, but we also want to ensure that how can I say this? We aren't trying to, one, empty the ocean with a teaspoon, and we aren't trying to solve world hunger. We're working on those things that are within our span of control and that we can really impact. When we talk about addressing challenging situations, we also talk about encouraging different points of view. In our increasingly diverse organizations, it's really important that people are honest with their opinions, the facts as they see them, their interpretation of a challenging situation, and bring forward any points of friction that there are. But we need to let people be honest and be their authentic selves. We want to encourage others to own their own problems and work on the troubleshooting. How many times have you leaders had an opportunity to solve a problem on behalf of your team members when in fact we should be growing their own problem solving and troubleshooting skills? So don't take delivery on their problems, help them through them and help them come to a successful conclusion. And then the last one, and this is also true whether it's a challenging situation or just daily interactions, demonstrate respect for the speaker. If you have someone coming to you with something that's really causing them some consternation, Be sure that you are respectful of the fact that they're brave enough to bring it forward, regardless of the emotion attached to it. And then if things do get a little on the high side with regard to emotion, encourage everyone to just take a step back and wait for the emotions to dissipate before you try and do any big problem solving. So this in and of itself is just a snapshot of one of the learning objectives that we tackle in the communication course within this emerging leaders area. So as I mentioned, there are many other areas that we can talk about in the communication, but the next class that we talk about in the series is emotional intelligence. Now, you can tell that there is a nice blend and overlap of the topics that we have in this series, because what we're hoping is that as you go through the series, the information gradually builds to make a complete picture of what that terrific leader looks like. So when we consider emotional intelligence, what we do is take a look at ourselves and our emotions as we bring those into our work environment. We also talk about having some empathy and awareness for other people's emotions. And as you can see, that one's in red, so we'll dive a little deeper in just a second. The other two learning objectives for this include understanding the importance of constructive dialogue. That's a really intentional word. So constructively attaching troubleshooting, empathy, and grown-up behaviors, and leveraging emotional energy. So when I talk about emotional energy, I'm talking about that perhaps negative or challenging emotional energy that might need to be redirected. And I'm also talking about positive energy when we have someone that's really excited about a particular project or their role within a project, and leveraging that to motivate the entire team. So really important on both of those perspectives. And then the other thing that we do in the emotional intelligence class is we have a chance to practice some interactions where emotions can be observed, and then we practice real time, how to address those emotions. And we go through the whole spectrum. As a leader, you know that you have everyone on your team from Pollyanna to Eeyore. So let's help all of them come through and be successful in their work. So back up to that top objective, there were two parts in that. And one portion is reflecting on our own emotional strengths and weaknesses. So taking a pause to capture for yourself, that's not something that we share in the class, but we do give you time to do the reflection about where your strengths and weaknesses are when you come to work. How does your mood affect your thoughts, your outlook, your decision-making, and your demeanor? And then what's going on under the surface that influences what others say or do? I think we all know that bad moods can be contagious. Well, guess what? Good moods can too. And when you enjoy what you're doing and you can encourage others to be happy in the work that they are doing as well, we can create a fun environment or a tense one. And whether we like it or not, people are looking to us as the team leader to set the atmosphere and the tone for our work environment. So this is one side of the reflection. The other side is thinking about others and how much do we have empathy for others' emotions? How easy is it for us to put ourselves in someone else's shoes and think about things from their perspective? And what do we need to do in order to help that happen? The last part of this talks about acknowledging someone else's emotions demonstrates that you're paying attention to them and how they feel. And I mentioned a little bit of this with the positive and not so positive. It gives you an opportunity to validate the fact that they might be frustrated with something, or there might be some tension, and just help it be in the open, or help them have a pride in a sense of accomplishment for something that they've done particularly well. I think sometimes leaders don't always consider the fact that we need that constant positive reinforcement so that people keep doing the things that they're doing well. If we don't notice it at all, they might think we don't care, and we do. So that's the emotional intelligence class. And again, that one's kind of a fun one. We do a couple of activities there that aren't too touchy-feely, but they're really emotional awareness building. And that's very important for leaders to have as they strive to succeed in that environment. The third class in this series is managing projects and processes. So the learning objectives for this one is talking about universal project management. And there are a couple of hands-on activities that happen to help build this awareness. We talk about the steps that ensure that we're successful as we're managing projects. We talk about and use some visual tools, and I'll show you two of those in subsequent slides. And then the other part of that is to understand that there are obstacles that will get in the way sometimes. So we need to often build contingency plans or build in some ways that we can delegate and improve our focus. And that's for the whole team, not just our role. A lot of that has to do with roles and responsibilities and helping people know what to do and when. So this particular tool that's here next is just a timeline. However, there are some important aspects about this. You can see down the left side of this chart, there are high-level departments, planning or research or in the design phase of the project. And it's easy for us at a high level to put that level of activity in and show it month by month. It gives us a chance to use this tool when we have sponsor updates, perhaps, or those people that are not intimately involved with the project, but it comes close to or bumps into something that they have as an accountability, and it gives them an awareness of inputs and outputs so that we keep them abreast of what needs to happen with the project. I think of this kind of as a 30,000-foot view, as if viewed from an airplane, because it's very high level. The project team likely couldn't take actionable steps from this, but it's really good as an overview for those that need that information sharing. Another tool in the managing projects and processes class is a swim lane diagram. This is a little bit small, but I think you should be able to get the idea. So often the tasks that go here are a department or a role or an individual. And what this allows you to do is, and sometimes a timeline is overlaid on the x-axis across the top, but it gives you actionable steps and gives you a good idea of what can happen in parallel or in series. So in this particular slide, you see that in the Joe Welder, Joe Welder, that's him, swim lane, as well as in the Jack Joyner swim lane, the box that says inspect is in both of their swim lanes, in both of their accountabilities. Now, this is perhaps necessary, or it might be redundant. So when we use a swim lane diagram to map a process, it helps us see what things can go concurrently so that the whole timeline doesn't stretch out further than it needs to, or what things are perhaps something that could be tackled at a different spot in the process and just take resources from one individual or one role. So really helpful tools when we talk about managing projects and processes. And again, you saw all those other learning objectives. So this is just a little slice of that. The next class that we have is conflict resolution. And as we look at the learning objectives for this, you'll see that there are a number of things that help us understand not only how to manage potential conflict and friction, which we talked about earlier, but also resolving what that is and understanding why the conflict took place. So in this particular set of learning objectives, we talk about analyzing the nature of the conflict, identifying what type of conflict it is, using problem solving, critical thinking, and decision-making processes and tools to sort that out and get to the bottom of it. And we also talk about communication skills, and we talked a little bit about those, but again, here's some of that intentional overlap because it's used in a different context. So if I forward the slide and talk about those different types of conflicts, you can see in business, wow, there are a bunch of potential. Now, I wouldn't expect to see any project encounter all of these, but one or two isn't that uncommon. So we talk about values as a potential conflict, the principles that we hold, the ethics that we have, and hopefully not those last two, but depending on what it is, if there is a misconnect or a misfire with those, they can really derail a project. The next one talks about individuals that want to have maximum influence over the project. And we talk about this, we talk about process influence, or maybe action steps, or the way that decisions are made. All of those are types of influence that individuals might want to exert on a given project or process. We talk about competitive forces and the potential for either scarce resources or new products or new efficiencies that our competitors might have gained that we need to address and incorporate. We talk about incompatible styles in communication or misunderstanding or disconnect on goals or approaches. All of those have some interpersonal components, and it's important that we address those and help them be resolved so that the project or the process can go ahead. And then we're all familiar, I think, with environmental pressure, such as recession, high employment rate, or, oh, I don't know, a big old world, masking extravaganza. So there are lots of things in our environment that we need to take into account, and potential areas of conflict that we want to overcome to help all of the things that we are striving for our goals to be met or minimized. The next class in this series talks about embracing teamwork. And as team leaders, the word team gets thrown around a lot. It is one of those things that if you've heard this definition before, a group of people that are working together that don't really trust one another and don't have common goals is really just a group of people working together. It's not a team. So in the learning objectives for the Embracing Teamwork class, we talk about learning and developing an appreciation for the different team members' roles, their purpose for being on the team. And we also talk about ground rules or group established expectations for how we behave, how we get into the details, how often we'd like to communicate, and how we work together across the disciplines or functional groups in order to maximize our productivity and efficiency. We're going to talk a little bit about in the next slide, recognizing opportunities that come when change happens and how we can overcome those challenges. Another learning objective in this area is to define motivation and get better as team leaders in motivating and inspiring our team members as a team, helping them work together and capitalize on each other's strengths. And the last one talks about strengths as well, and that has to do with matching the things that we're good at for our specific team members and with the things that they like to do and the things that they're good at. Nothing easier to motivate than someone who is really excited about their job and their work and their role on the team. Everybody gets there faster when they're doing things that they enjoy. Recognizing opportunities in change come in these three areas, and I just called them out this way: innovation, process improvement, and efficiency. Innovation, I think, comes more easily when we build on each other's ideas. How often have you had a brainstorming session and somebody throws out an idea, even if it's a little wacko, but it sparks another thought in someone else's mind, and you come up with a step change type of opportunity that the one individual hadn't thought of or hadn't considered on their own. Process improvements are kind of the same way. When we understand better the roles of other people on our teams, if we understand what procurement needs or what planning needs in order to do exceptional work, we have process improvements that, again, alone, we might not have considered or implemented. And then the last one is really just about efficiency. And that comes when we leverage each other's strengths. I talked about that a little bit on the earlier slide. And that is really, if you can leverage the fact that one person loves to send out the newsletter, and so for your project, they might be the greatest person that you have to give project updates because that kind of work appeals to them. It's a win-win all the way around. And the last of the 6 classes in this Emerging Leader series is called Cultivating Culture. And this one is something that we often live with and enjoy or don't care for, but we don't often think about why that is. And so a portion of this class helps us understand what culture is and the elements that we have in play that can make it either a positive place to be or a not so positive place to be. We do take some time in these classes to talk about your company's specific culture and what the elements are. And then we talk and spend some time on identifying how we can use the things that we want to keep this culture going and sustain it for the long term. So we think about ways that we can incorporate our culture into our everyday dialogue, in our workplace and our team meetings, and the way that we need to keep the culture top of mind. In this exercise, the one learning outcome that I listed as one we would dive into is this exercise we do when we talk about each of our individual companies' cultures. This is really nice when we have multiple people from the same organization in the class, because what they can identify in a very honest way is elements that slow you down or cause confusion in your culture, and identify ways to stop those or avoid them. We also talk about elements of the culture that are terrific just as they are, that we want to reinforce and sustain them so that we keep going with the culture. Like everyone in the whole organization calls one another by their first name rather than a title. And then the last one here is to incorporate cultural items and elements that maybe you have noticed from another culture like Google or some of the others that are a little more forward thinking, and something that would play well and work well with your own teams so that you have this positive forward thinking organization in your own area, a culture that you can live with, get behind, and in fact, you can even use it to promote your company as you seek for new employees. So this has been a really quick overview with a little bit of a taste of the emerging leadership classes and courses that we have. And I'll be really excited to see you in some of them. Thanks. Angie, back to you.
Awesome, thank you. I'm just gonna start my view up here again.
Would you like me to stop sharing?
Sure, you can, that'd be awesome. Start my video. There we go. Thank you very, very much. That was a super dive into, oh, there's a lot in there, right? So those are a lot of important key topics that I think we all need to keep top of mind, and definitely a good overview of maybe some additional options that people have and opportunities for learning. Just a couple of them. We have a little bit of time, so I'll dig into it. Kind of going back to one of the first slides that you had where you talked about communication, and you talked about the, being able to stop and kind of clarify. So as someone has talked, kind of giving it back to them, right, to make sure that you're understanding it. One of the things that I know I always have struggled in that is I don't want to sound like a parrot. I think that can, there's a risk there a little bit of being condescending, right? So how do you navigate that? So like if let's role play, right? So if I came to you as my leader and was, saying that, I'm really upset because I noticed that Sally and I are doing similar roles, but how come I always get so much more work? How come I always end up finishing all the spreadsheets? And it's so frustrating because I see that, she gets to leave on time and I'm always here late because I always seem to have more to do than her when we're equals. Why is that? So
Sure.
How would you put that back to me?
Yes. So if I understand you correctly, the frustration that you have today is that even though you and Sally are in the same role, it feels like you have a larger workload than what she does. And you'd like to see if there's a way to share the workload more evenly, or find out at least why we chose you to do some of the specific tasks like the spreadsheet activities or some of the others. Is that right? Is that what you're saying?
Perfect. Yes, that's a great example. Thank you. Because that sounded fantastic. And I know that that's something that I consciously try to do myself, but I always am worried about sounding too much like a parrot. So,
well, and the trouble or a potential pitfall, I'll say it that way, with an exercise of that active listening is it's hard for me as a leader not to dive into problem solving. So
right.
as you're telling me that there's inequity, one of my next questions would be, what do you think would be a more equitable way to separate the work? Or what is it that you believe would be a good solution to give you a better opportunity to leave on time?
Right.
So I'm not taking the problem away from you, but I'm offering a chance for you to tell me what a potential solution is.
Mm-hmm. And you bring up such a good point in that, because I think that's a hazard that many of us face, is the going right to the problem solving.
Right.
Where, in that situation, yes, the example I think I gave you was someone came to you and they're looking for a solution and,
right,
wanting you to dig in a little bit deeper. But so often it's evaluating whether they just need you to listen and they're venting.
right.
That's okay. Everybody needs space to do that.
Right.
you miss it when you're trying to figure out, well, what do they want me to do for them, or how can I help them, or how can I make this pain go away?
Yeah. Right,
I know that's a struggle for me
right.
when I talk to folks. So
Yes, me too.
yeah, I actually made a little, and there are a few team members on here, but I made a little sign that's like, just listen or fix it, right? So it's like, if I'm struggling, I just kind of slide that over to them and tell me what you want me to do.
Sure. Well, and that, I mean, oftentimes we want to help, but we want to give the right kind of help.
Right. And often they just truly, I think more often than not, I hear, I just want you to listen. I'm
Yes,
just thinking.
right.
And that's an important thing to do, right? And then that can drive your decision making going forward, and maybe how you choose to do the next thing a little bit differently. But
Right.
at that point in time, they just needed you to listen. So
Yes, absolutely.
the other thing I just want to touch on is you talked about culture, and I know that that's something at Western that has been, we spent a lot of time as a leadership group and as a college, across college, talking about culture, really working and striving to put together a culture statement that everyone within the institution can support and get behind, and to use that to kind of guide some decision making, and like you said,
Right.
hiring and that. What do you do, or how do you address it if you just, maybe even as an individual, you're not feeling it, right? So it's like, I've been here a long time, the culture has changed. I think that's what can be a big hazard, or a feeling, is you've been with the organization for 20 years and it's not the same organization that you started in.
Right.
What's some guidance and self-assessment you could do to kind of go through that process?
Well, and when you said you're just not feeling it and the culture has changed, it feels like you're feeling a disconnect. You're feeling like maybe you're not part of the culture, or the culture has morphed into something that you just, excuse me, you didn't know about when you first started. So one of the things that we do in the class, and that's why I mentioned that it's nice to have more than one representative from a particular company, because it allows us to do some actual work on identifying the elements that we really enjoy in the culture. We enjoy that people go out to lunch together. We enjoy that if I've got a problem in this area, and I'm overworked in this segment of the process, that group feels free enough to raise their hand and say, "Ooh, hey, we could use a little support over here." Okay, so those are cultural elements that we want to sustain, and then identify things that maybe aren't so stellar that we want to stop doing. And when you think about yourself as a long-term employee, it's important to get all of the people on the team together to really talk through culture and discuss, what does our culture want to look like in today's work environment? How do we want to be seen? How do we want to interact with the community? How do we want to portray ourselves in our recruiting advertisements? We want to be known as a company that has a good deal of caring. We want to be known as someone who has a high degree of community involvement. We want to be in an area or a company that offers a great deal of flexibility to our employees. So we have that opportunity to have flex place or flex time arrangements.
Yep.
Product and service notwithstanding, right? Because that's not always possible. But to get the whole team together, and I say that word intentionally, the team, and have specific groups talk about what they like, what they would like to keep moving with, or what they'd like to start. Is a really important thing. It's to talk about culture out loud. So one of the things I mentioned that we do is to help people identify keywords and other either symbols or phrases or catchphrases that they use to keep that culture top of mind. And often, and I have used this to moderate conflict or friction or project hurdles, is to leave that cultural piece up here and say, remember, our ground rules are this, our
Right.
values are this, our culture says this is how we get along and behave. I understand that this is a problem, but let's set this aside in favor of doing what the customer needs, or whatever that cultural
Sure.
message is.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think it's just, it's such an important reminder to think about how things have changed. We just, it's no longer that work environment. And I say this often, we're whole humans, right?
Yeah.
So, there was for decades, I think the mentality was you came to work and you did your job and then you walked away. And it was like there's not like a magical screen at the office door or the factory door that says, now you're transforming into this and now you're this, you're a whole human. And like it or not, we kind of experience that when we're all working closely together. So
Right.
yeah.
And we are, as a community of work, embracing differences much more strongly than we have before. And boy, we are better for it.
Mhm.
Greater ideas, better efficiency, new ways to do things. It's
Agreed.
been really lovely.
Yeah. And I think the COVID experience actually helped that. If there's a positive to take away from that, is because, everybody was forced to think about their health and their families first. And we became more flexible because we had to, right? And in many cases, if you were like our office, you were literally sitting in someone's home with them a good chunk of the day,
Right.
and saw life happening around them. And it
Yeah.
did bring that humanity to it that I think sometimes can be a little lost or forgotten in an intense work environment. So
Yes, I agree.
yeah.
I agree.
Okay. Well, I don't see any questions coming in on the chat. So with that, I think we'll go ahead and wrap up. We really appreciate and thank you so much for your time today and sharing some of your expertise. And I know throughout the session, great tips, good takeaways that we could kind of pack into the short time we had together to talk about such a broad topic, but there are opportunities for us to go deeper. And looking at some of the opportunities that exist from Western, we do have a series coming up that will run, I believe February through March, and then May through July. There's a couple of opportunities in the spring, and then late spring into summer, where we will dig into that emerging leaders series and kind of break down each of the topics that you addressed today and go deeper into them and share some experiences and interactions as a group to help learn more and learn better.
And that's a great point, Angie, because one of the things that I have found that I really love about doing these classes is that we have so much great experience that walks into the door. We have the full potpourri of people that are really just launching their leadership careers versus those that may have been leading others formally or informally for some years in their own industry. And I know Steve does too, invite these folks to all share their experiences.
Mhm.
And I've had some really, really nice cross-company coaching from leader to leader. It's beautiful.
And that's great because finally we can be back in the classroom together. And there were good things that came out of COVID, like we just talked about. And it's great to be able to, go from Zoom meeting to Zoom meeting and not have to travel and some of those components, but in a training environment, you cannot, the value that you get just from that human interaction and being able to talk in a classroom and share those experiences. We love that. And we're glad to be back and glad to have you kind of hosting that for us. So
yeah, absolutely. It's huge.
It's huge, right? So anybody that is interested in maybe learning some more about those opportunities, I would invite them to reach out to us. They can do that through email, bis@westerntc.edu. And again, that's Business Industry Services, bis@westerntc.edu. They can reach out to us and we'll share some information and help them get connected if they want to learn more about those opportunities. So with
Terrific.
that, I think we will end. I appreciate your time today and wish you and everybody viewing a great holiday season. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Angie. You too.
Yep.
Bye now.
Thank you for viewing this video from Western Technical College Business and Industry Services. Learn more about the hundreds of training and development opportunities available for your employees at westerntc.edu/BIS.